Anniversary by Search and Rescue Woods. We know their names, their birthdays. We know who had missing teeth and who was afraid of the dark, who had bruises. We know who had a hair-lip scar, who had a brother that died while being born. We know what they wanted to be when they grew up. We can fill books with what we know, but what we don't is the only thing that matters to us. We've retraced our steps, gone over every piece that we have, but in the end it doesn't add up to anything. All we can do is pore over it again, and try again, and again, and again, to make it all go somewhere, lead to something, because nothing else is important anymore. All that matters is what we don't have. Here's what we know. On June 21st, 1995, a local Cub Scout troop met at the south entrance of the national park, which is located approximately 20 miles from town. They were led by two scoutmasters, Huxley and Anders. There were 18 boys in attendance ranging from ages 7 to 10. For many of them, it was their first real camping trip. The town is small, and most, if not all of them, knew each other by name at least. Everyone had been given permission by their parents to go. Their uniforms had been freshly cleaned, their packs new and still stiff on their shoulders. We can only imagine the cacophony of all these young boys running around in a picnic area. We bring this up because they were real. People forget that. They were real. They were alive. You could touch them. They ran around and they had nightmares and they enjoyed ice cream. They were real children with lives. The Scoutmasters got everyone together and took attendance. One witness remembered seeing them before they left on their own hike. They were there by the tables, a big group of them. Honestly, I was glad that they went the other way. Cute, but, I didn't really want them on my back. I guess I don't feel like that now, though. But they seemed like they knew what they were doing. The group entered the forest at around 8 in the morning, as best we can figure. There aren't any cameras out there, of course, but based on their schedule, we feel confident that that is an accurate figure. They took a trail that leads into the mountains, about 40 miles, before looping back and ending about 5 miles from the entrance. The group intended to go about 5 miles, where they would camp at the base of the mountain, at an established site. Along the way, they passed a group of tourists who reported seeing nothing unusual. The boys were in good spirits. They were following along and chattering noisily. One of them, a boy we later identified as an 8-year-old Peter Connolly, waved hello as he passed. The tourists waved back. As the group made their way up the trail, they stopped frequently to identify plants and trees. During one of the stops, the boys began a pinecone war, which passing hikers became involved in. The game ended when a younger boy, we don't know which one, suddenly began to cry, and a ceasefire was called. The hiker said the boy didn't appear to be injured, but he seemed frightened by something in the trees. Something he kept pointing at. The hiker didn't see anything and he moved on. The group stayed a little longer before moving on as well. Further up the trail, a candy bar wrapper was discovered, impaled on a branch. We aren't sure who put it there, but one of the boys' mothers told us that it was her son's favorite brand. He really likes them. I keep him in the drawer so he can have one after school. You can't find them here. You have to go to Denley's up in Bridgeport. They have them. They know he likes them. She began to cry, so we ended the interview. We kept the wrapper initially as evidence, but have since given it back to the boy's mother. When we interviewed her, it was being kept on the fridge, held up by a magnet with the boy's picture on it. She didn't allow us to photograph it for the record. The boys reached the campsite around 1 o'clock. One other family was present, but didn't intend to stay the night. They had been there a few days and were packing up the site as the scouts were settling in. The family was a father and his 2 daughters. They made small talk with the boys and the scoutmasters. "Oh, it was fun. They were running around. I had the girls help them set up their tents." He looked back out before the interview. He had sent his 2 young daughters outside. "I mean, it was fine. They were fine. We've been up here a million times. They got set up and I was talking with Howard? Huxton? We corrected him. Huxley, yeah, Huxley. We were talking and he said something about if I knew any good swimming places. But, this time of year it's so cold. So I told him that. And he said that was fine, and we sort of just talked for a little bit longer. Then me and the girls headed out. Nothing bad or anything. They just wanted to go swimming and have fun." From this point on, we don't have any official record on what the group did. We know based on what was left behind that tents were put up and a fire was started. Sticks were found with blackened tips, so at least a few of the boys roasted things in the fire. Logs were set up with scuff marks on them in the dirt, where the boys would rest their feet. Someone tossed their cap up in a tree, and it was still there when the search party arrived. They probably intended to retrieve it on the way out. The boys sat around the fire and told stories. They probably roasted things. The scoutmaster smoked cigarettes and drank at least 4 beers. There were cans found outside the camp. Again, we believe they intended to retrieve them on the way out. A trail through the brush led us to believe that some of the boys went out to a clearing to look at stars. They're remarkably clear out there. The boys went to bed. The scoutmasters stayed up for a little while to make sure everyone was asleep. And at some point they too went to bed. The camp was quiet. Again, there's no official account of what happened next. All we know for sure is that at some point camp was packed and the group moved on. Nothing save for the articles that were mentioned left behind. All of the group moved west, further up the trail. It's believed that they were headed for the swimming area. All of the boys' mothers confirmed that the children took swimming equipment. All of them knew how to swim. Whether they actually went, of course, we aren't sure. But we can imagine a group winding up the trail, the boys in a line talking to each other and singing songs. The boys would be looking forward to swimming, to spending another night in the woods. Their spirits would have been high. They would have eaten a good breakfast of eggs and hot dogs. Which makes it all the more heartbreaking that at some point along the trail on June 22nd, all 20 people in the group vanished. The group was due back that afternoon. Parents began arriving around 3, when the group still hadn't shown up by 5. A few of them decided to hike a ways up the trail to see what had delayed them. After hiking for almost 3 miles and having no sight of them, they realized that something was wrong. They hurried back to the entrance. The call came in at approximately 6, and by 7, the park was swarming with police and search and rescue. Those of us in town were quick to learn about it. Word traveled fast, and the hysteria that came along with it was almost intoxicating. Within minutes, it seemed the town was full of police, park rangers, neighboring counties, search team, large German shepherds on leashes being led into the entrance, with their nose to the ground. The search itself was massive and encompassed tens of miles of the park, much further than anyone realistically expected them to have traveled. The dogs were taken out and given multiple scents to work with in all directions. There was, certainly, no lack of effort that could explain why nothing and no one was ever found. In an almost grotesque move, all 18 sets of parents were brought in front of a camera in this huge, miserable group. They were given turns to give their children messages and plead with their imagined captors, to offer rewards, to offer forgiveness. For weeks, the population in the town was almost doubled. Many families, including ours, offered room and board to the volunteers, flooding in at an incredible rate. Eventually, it did make national news. Every single tree in town wore a yellow ribbon. But as time went on and the search turned up nothing, people began to leave. They went back home to their real lives. As incredible as it seems, the boys were largely forgotten. A rumor began to spread that the group had drowned in the lake, although no one had been found in it. For a long time, people talked about the pit at the bottom of the lake, which went deep, deep into the earth, and contained more than those 20 bodies. The rumor persisted and was used to justify the removal of the yellow ribbons, and the signs on the telephone poles screaming, "Bring our boys home." On August 15th, the police chief gave a televised speech, insisting that the case was still open and being investigated. Despite the severity of the crime, the nation moved on. Donations dried up and searches could no longer be afforded. The lake was closed and the yellow ribbons vanished. On June 21st, 1996, local emergency services received a call from a terrified woman who claimed that something was in her backyard. No transcripts exist of any of the calls made that evening, but through many interviews, we've been able to piece most of them together. The first call from the terrified woman was placed at approximately 8 o'clock in the evening. According to the officer who took the call, the woman claimed that someone had defaced one of the trees in her backyard. She couldn't explain how they had done it, or even who it might have been, but as she described, one of the trees in her backyard had a face. The face, she said, was screaming loudly and begging her to come outside and help it. She wanted the awful thing removed immediately. An officer was dispatched immediately, but discovered nothing. The woman could not explain where the face had gone. 2 hours later, calls began to pour in from all over town. Later, as we discovered, all of the calls were placed from homes that bordered or were located in the woods. An elderly man called to complain about 2 boys playing some kind of game at the edge of his property. The boys, he explained, had crammed themselves into one shirt and were playing at being conjoined in some awful fashion. Their screaming woke up his wife, who was gravely ill, and he wanted to press charges. 2 blocks down, a young single mother reported seeing a very young boy running at the edge of the trees. But he never seemed to move. He simply just ran in place, his arms pumping, his face wet with tears. She looked at him in the eye, and as if by magic, he disappeared. 1 mile away on property located within the forest, a hunter reported seeing a boy walking upside down through the air, almost 20 feet off the ground, carrying his own spine in his arms like a baby. All across town, strange noises were heard, muffled conversations, screaming, crying. A name was heard, which was later connected to one of the missing boys. A woman reported hearing a strange, repetitive sound that she likened to a chainsaw, the sound a chainsaw would make when it hits rocks. It woke her 2 children up, frightened them badly enough that she bundled them into a car and drove to her mother's house a county away. And still, the calls poured in. Well into the hours of the night, people reported seeing horrible things. One man, a notorious drunk, called in stone cold sober, reported seeing the head of a young boy emerging from the ground. The mouth a distorted and elongated scream of terror. As the head rose from the ground, the jaw didn't end, but it stretched like taffy until the whole thing was double his height. He shut the blinds tightly, then drank himself into a coma. He has since died, and we can't confirm his story. All over town, on the anniversary of the disappearance of those 20 souls, strange apparitions were seen, heard, in some cases felt. A teenage girl walking in the woods with her boyfriend on a late-night date tripped over something. Upon closer inspections, she determined what she had tripped over was not, in fact, a bush, but it was the top of someone's head. When it moved under her fingers, she and the young man just fled into the night, terrified beyond reason. As the sun began to rise, the calls dwindled, and then just stopped. Despite the entire town having seen and heard the strange apparitions, the incident was not discussed by any media, or even between people themselves. However, an exodus of the town soon followed. Many of the 18 families moved away, never to be seen again. They left quickly and with no fuss. They simply packed their things, took their remaining children, and fled into the night, leaving behind rooms that were painted blue, or yellow, or green. We didn't pursue them. The town, desperate to move on, willingly forgot those yellow ribbons, those painted rooms. While the houses still stand, they remain empty. Squatters don't live there. The rooms are bare and the houses are like physical memories. There's constant talk of demolition, but nothing ever comes of it. The 20 people lost on June 21st, 1995 have never been found. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I want to thank my $10 and above patrons, in order, always in order: Dan R., Paul Z., Mr. Swiston, Official Jerboa, Chaos X, JY, Pyromancer, Hayden MH, and Ethan A. Guys, thank you so much for your support, and I hope you enjoyed that new Patreon video I put up. If you want to join and get your name read off, get your name in the description, and get access to Patreon-only content, please go down to the link below. Thank you.